Polyface Farm mission is to develop environmentally, emotionally, and economically enhancing agricultural prototypes and facilitate their duplication throughout the world. We view ourselves basically as stewards of this niche of God's creation, and then we ask the land, okay, what is conducive? What are you conducive for? What do you want to do? And we know that this area historically was a kind of savanna, a savanna prairie with multi-species herbivores and birds grazing on it. And so we raise cows, behind which we follow with the eggmobiles with chickens. And the chickens then scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, and scratch the cow patties into the ground. And what this does is produce eggs as a byproduct of the pasture sanitation. And so instead of using $2,000 worth of toxic parasiticide or grubicide to protect the cows from worms and grubs and pathogenic parasites, instead we collect $15,000 a year worth of assets, worth of eggs from the byproduct of the pasture sanitation program of cattle hygiene. We build, of course, the compost using the pigorators. Again, the pig has a plow on the end of his nose. How can we let that pig enjoy the use of its plow? And by doing that, guess what? We have happy pigs, which makes healthy pigs, which amazingly makes higher nutritive meat. It actually has more iron, more beta carotenes, more B vitamins. The fat profile changes in our eggs. The omega-3, omega-6 profile changes. Grass-fed beef has your conjugated linoleic acid, one of the most potent anti-carcinogens that there is. And it also is shown now to maybe be the #1 deterrent for Alzheimer's. You know, it's amazing, all of these debilitating diseases, so many of these debilitating diseases we're having in our Western culture are simply an outgrowth of confining animals, disconnecting animals, and eliminating their natural salad bar green material from their diet. And you do that, and suddenly you've got things showing up in the population. They're known as Western diseases. You don't see them in indigenous cultures that are eating close to the land in their backyard and what they produce themselves. And so the point is that when we farm this way, by stacking the different complementary animals and plants, like grazing in vineyard. We have vineyard and we graze under the grapevines with turkeys. Instead of going out there with a lawnmower and mowing it, or a mowing machine and mowing it, the turkeys graze it and mow it. They leave manure behind, which fertilizes, and they debug it so we don't have to use any sprays. And so this is all that wonderful symbiosis that happens when we integrate and diversify the ecology of the commercial farm, as opposed to centralizing and supposedly streamlining and simplifying, i.e. not diversifying or undiversifying the farm, and viewing, you know, like poultry industry views starlings and sparrows as, you know, the #1 pathogen carriers. Well, we've been enjoying starlings and sparrows drinking out of our pasture field pens for 3 decades and have never had one single outbreak. So we can live in harmony with nature rather than looking at wildlife as something that might bring in a disease to our confinement house and destroy our livelihood. So we actually enhance the immune system in our animals rather than destroy it through, you know, the confinement type of agriculture. And so the mainline agriculture externalizes all of its costs in pathogenicity, in the foodborne bacterial illnesses, in all of the government agents that have to watch the pollution, the spills from the lagoons and all those kinds of things, externalizes those costs, whereas our system, all the costs are factored in. So Our food is more expensive than what's in the supermarket, but what's in the supermarket is not a true cost because 50% of all the cases of diarrhea in the U.S. are caused by foodborne bacteria. Well, we've checked our chicken manure for salmonella, and there's no salmonella even in our manure, let alone the chicken. So what's the cost of half the cases of diarrhea? You know, I don't like it, you don't like it, nobody likes it, but the conventional agriculture food system externalizes those costs. It doesn't factor that into 39-cent chicken. It's not a true cost of doing business. So all of our costs are factored in, and when you factor in all of those costs, our system produces food actually more abundantly and cheaper, with all costs factored in, than the allegedly efficient confinement fecal factory feedlot system. I think that Dad's vision grew out of his father's vision, my grandfather, who was a charter subscriber to Robert Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine, which began post-World War II, during that watershed period when there were people like Ed Faulkner, Louis Bromfield, Rodale, and these kind of people were, the country hadn't decided yet whether it was going to go chemical or whether it was going to go biological and natural. And these were very influential people. I mean, Ed Faulkner's Plowman's Folly sold over 500,000 copies in like 1 year. Can you imagine a book today selling 500,000? But at that time there were goodness 7-8 million farmers, and so anyway, there was a watershed time, and Dad's father definitely took the organic non-chemical approach, and Dad took it from him, and then I took it from my dad. But when Dad began developing these systems, I well remember him bringing in consultants. And the consultants all said, plant crops, build silos, graze the forest with cattle, and all of these things. It was all quick buck, payback today, don't worry about tomorrow. And Dad always took a long-range view, and I think that's what separates a lot of the people in the more environmental persuasion, worldview, than the concentrated animal feeding operation, CAFO, is a long-term view. We're looking at this and saying, can we do this? What would this look like if we continued to do it for 500 years? Has anybody with a 10,000 sow confinement hog operation looked at that and said, what would this look like if we did this for 500 years? And had all the manure lagoon spills and all of the, you know, the dead pigs and all the problems that we have. And so it was a long-range view. Secondly, I think he realized as an economist very quickly that the chemical approach was essentially a drug trip. And it was a vicious cycle in that you always had to get a bigger kick or a bigger dose to get the same kick, or a more potent dose to get the same kick. And we see that today. We're using fewer pounds of pesticides, but the pesticides today that we're using are 10 times more lethal than they were 20 years ago by pounds. And so the industry likes to promote, well, we're using fewer pounds, but actually the pounds that we're using are far more lethal. And so Dad saw this, I think, as more an economic treadmill than an environmental. Now, what I have brought to it, as I have read more of the movement and have observed, you know, now second generation or third generation observing and pondering these things, we have actually moved this even beyond just the economics, beyond just the treadmill, beyond just the long-range view, and have actually developed a very spiritual dimension to this, and that is we ask the question of every plant and animal on this farm, what kind of a habitat can we create for you that fully allows you to express your physiological distinctiveness? That's not a question that the conventional people ask. They're looking for sameness. They just assume a pig responded just like a cow, just like a tomato, just like a pepper. They're looking for the Soylent Green. They're looking for, sameness, cloning. It's all just material, and we extrude it, amalgamate it, squeeze it all back together, reconstitute it, irradiate it, chlorinate it, and voila, we've got food in a square, and we believe that our appreciation for one another's differences, for one another's diversities, is predicated, is built, is founded on a fundamental appreciation of a chicken fully expressing her chickenness and a pig fully expressing his pigness. And when we do not allow the biological world, the biological parts of our world to express their physiological distinctiveness, we have arrogated to ourselves a place of disrespect and irreverence to the natural world. And the way that shows itself out in our daily lives is a lack of respect for one another, a lack of respect for people who dress differently, look differently, speak a different language, who live in another part of the world, or all of these kinds of things grow out of how we view the animals and plants around us. Some of the strongest influences on me, besides my own dad, have been people like Charles Walters, who publishes Acres USA magazine, and his son Fred now has taken that over. Been delightful to watch that transition. Certainly Alan Nation, the editor of Stockman Grass Farmer, has been especially good at keeping focus on the economics of this whole grass farming, regenerative agriculture, and has been a real wonderful mentor. On a more personal note, probably, one of my great mentors here in our region is Reed Putney, who has been a long time advocate of sustainable agriculture and who really mentored Dad into beginning to use things like seaweed and mineral and growing some other kinds of species of animals. And he now operates Countryside Natural Products here in Fishersville. He has sold his farm and now runs a supply business to supply the materials for organic or ecological agriculture, and he's indispensable in that realm, and has just been a real mentor for me. The apprenticeship program we began about 8 years ago in order to allow young people to learn these skills and then take them back and do something with them on their own place. And so we have 2 a year, and we require a 12-month program because what we do is so seasonal. And if you came in the summer, you'd think all we do is work. If you came in the winter, you'd think all we do is sit around the fire and read books. So, and we think both of those things are important. So, so we have 2 at a time, kind of stagger them, and these young people can come and work with us. We basically adopt them into our family, and it's a very intimate relationship, and they work right alongside us for a year. And it's been extremely rewarding. It has its costs, though. It's not free labor. We do pay them a stipend. They get all their room and board as well, and most of them gain about 10 to 15 pounds while they're here. A lot of that is just bulking up from doing the kind of work that we do, but it allows me to do more education, information type things, and allows me to leverage my experience on young energy. And that is the way life is supposed to be, is to allow the older person to leverage their experience on young energy, and then that creates this wonderful synergism within the business.